Can you hear me okay? I want to check our audio. Great. My name is Rich McGinnis. I'm Deputy Director for Waterfront Planning for the Boston Redevelopment Authority. Welcome to our Municipal Harbor Planning Advisory Committee meeting. My colleagues from the BRA, Lauren Sherlick and Chris Bush, are joining me. Our consulting team from UTIL, Mary Dion and Matthew Littell are with us, and Steve McGee and Tom Skinner from Durand and Astis. Chairing the committee today, Vivian Lee will be acting as the chair for this meeting. We'll be coordinating the discussion. A little bit about today's program. I want to keep us on schedule as much as possible. We've got a lot of things to cover today. As you know, we've invited all the property owners in the planning area to come and present to the committee to talk about their sites, the challenges of their sites, and what they'd like to do to improve their properties or possibly redevelop. The Chiofaro Company presented to the Harbor Planning Committee in September 25th, and provided some details on how to activate the ground plane, how to improve the existing conditions, and also looking at how to improve the site overall at the ground floor area. They're coming in today to provide more details of the building programming and some massing diagrams for input from the committee. But before we get into that, Tom Skinner is going to go over a framework, a harbor planning framework for the site, and provide some kind of general overview of the Chapter 91 kind of constraints on the property, the state's waterways regulations. So I'm going to jump right into Tom's presentation. We'll open it up for questions from the committee, and then go right into the presentation of the Harbor Garage site.
Thanks, Rich. Everyone hear me?
Yeah.
I wanted to take just a minute to talk about framework. I've used this word a lot. The last presentation on the Marriott Long Wharf, I was a little dissatisfied with part of our presentation. I think we may have inadvertently confused the issue of what the framework actually does. Framework we see as the lens through which you can look at these at any project for a given site. Part of this committee's charge is to help the city develop a municipal harbor plan, and that requires certain elements to be approved by the state. So when I go over a framework, it's really what are the things that you should be assessing as you look at various proposals for each project. It does not endorse or reject any specific project. It's, as I said, the lens through which you can evaluate a project for the municipal harbor plan. Eventually in the harbor planning process, we get to the specific size and height and how close to the water a given project is. Many of my colleagues on the team from the BRA and UTIL are part of that discussion. Our job for the harbor plan is to figure out how to convert what you would like to see into an approvable plan. Again, one of the questions at the meeting last month was, what do you want from us, sort of as a desperate plea. So I thought it might be helpful to go over the objectives of this presentation. We're going to review the relevant substitute provisions for this parcel. Again, we've done that before. We're going to do it in a little bit more detail. Go through the relevant MHP policies, the municipal harbor plan policies. These are based on the regulations and informed by state policies and the precedents that the city has established through prior municipal harbor plans. I have 4 slides on the framework for determining the substitute provisions and offsets, 2 for open space and 2 for height. And then at the end, or when we have time, to get your feedback on the framework rather than any specific proposal. We start where we started on other projects with some background information in terms of the jurisdiction. On the left part of the slide, in the light green, shows the extent of private tidelands. The yellow is the Harbor Garage parcel. You can see that it's entirely within private tidelands, which means that the ground floor may be facilities of private tenancy. On the right slide, that is the setback delineation. It appears that there may be a slice of the parcel that on the seaward edge, that would be where you'd have to provide facilities of public accommodation, but it's a very small piece of the parcel. In reality, you would probably find on the ground floor of a building like this all facilities of public accommodation, either through the city review process or even through the owner's economic analysis. But from a Chapter 91 standpoint, a large percent of the parcel is not required to have ground floor facilities of public accommodation. When we talk about the existing conditions, you can see the harbor garage structure right in the middle there. It's a pretty big footprint for the parcel. From city records, the parcel appears to be about 57,346 square feet, of which 57,014 square feet is building footprint, leaving a total of 322 square feet for open space, which is a 99.6% lot coverage. That's quite a bit in excess of what you would normally get under a Chapter 91 application, which requires 50%. In terms of height, the structure is 70 feet tall. Only on the waterfront edge, if this were a Chapter 91 compliant structure, would that be a problem, where height limitations are limited to 55 feet. Getting to the Chapter 91 baseline requirements and the two dimensional standards that are likely to be in play here. Building footprint we've often talked about in terms of open space. I think it's better to refer to it as building footprint, and we do offsets for building footprint that's in excess of 50%. The regulations require 1 square foot of open space on site for every square foot of building footprint. Where this parcel is a little over 57,000 square feet, that would translate into a little over 28,600 square feet of open space under Chapter 91. Building height, remember the standard for that is 55 feet high within 100 feet of the project shoreline, and then it steps up 1 foot in vertical height for every 2 foot back from the shoreline. So as you get to Atlantic Ave, the maximum height would be about approximately 150 feet. We've done a representation here of what a potential Chapter 91 compliant building would look like. This is not entirely accurate. You probably wouldn't wall off the greenway like that. You'd have more view corridors and so forth. But it does provide the 50% open space. It shows the building stepping up from the lower height up to the maximum with a very narrow floor at 145 feet. So if we weren't doing a harbor plan and this site were being redeveloped, a building would have to look something like that in order to comply with Chapter 91. Wanted to spend just a minute to go over some general observations on substitute provisions and offsets. We've talked a lot about formulas for figuring out various offsets. And it's important to realize that the regulations require some sort of analysis in our data to analyze any substitute provision. So if you go up in height, you have to somehow do an analysis to see how that impacts the ground level environment along the waterfront. We often use formulas for determining the offsets as well. For example, 1 square foot of open space that you can't provide has to be provided somewhere else. And those are very useful tools, but we don't want to necessarily get wrapped up in the formulas. They're not required as part of the municipal harbor plan. So we have a little more flexibility in terms of figuring out offsets on that score. We also talk about building footprint and building height very differently, and that's because they affect the ground level pedestrian environment in very different ways and are separated in the regulations. But it's also important to keep in mind that when you apply both of them to a specific parcel, they set the broad parameters for the building mass. How big is it going to be? very tall building that only covers 50% of the parcel is very different from a medium height building that covers 75% of the parcel. So we have to think about them differently, but in the end game, they come together to help determine how big a building is on a given site. So this is the first slide on the actual approach, the framework for determining offsets. And this is a little bit of its policy based on the regs and what we would like to use for this particular parcel and for this area. We talked in an earlier presentation about having a greater, the greater the percentage of lot coverage, over 50%, the larger the offset for each square foot of open space not provided. So for open space, as a project grows above 50%, the per square foot offset somehow increases, whatever it is. If it's open space in another area, maybe you do 1 square foot of open space if it's a 55% lot coverage. Maybe you do 1.5 square feet of open space if it's 60%. Maybe you do 3 feet if it's 70%. Those are made up numbers, just as an example, but it's indicative of trying to provide incentives to keep the lot coverage as small as possible. Offsets for building footprints must provide or improve additional open space that relates directly to the waterfront, but may not include interior spaces. And then the last one is from the regulations. The MHP must specify alternative site coverage ratios. That's where the MHP says, okay, you can go up to X% site coverage in exchange for doing this offset somewhere else. The important part, and the one that we've italicized here, and other requirements, means that you're not limited to just doing that. If you have a parcel that still does not quite activate the waterfront in the way that you feel, or if you have a project that doesn't activate the waterfront in a way that you think is appropriate, other steps can be taken in order to make sure that that is an active public waterfront area. As we go through looking for building footprint offsets, there's a priority in terms of what you look for. First, you identify potential areas of new open space. We've looked at discussed a couple of areas in terms of parking lots and streets that may be able to be used for parcels in this municipal harbor plan that are adjacent to a parcel or somewhere nearby. Second, identify improvements to existing open space areas from the public realm plan that are adjacent to the parcel or within the MHP planning area. This is a second priority area. Obviously, the first, actually getting more open space, is more important. If you can't find either of those, the third is to identify other nearby waterfront areas for acquisition or improvements. And then the fourth is to contribute to a fund for waterfront open space. You can't jump right to 4, you have to go to the first 3 first. The last one I've added is the other requirements from the previous slide. If after all of those things it still doesn't feel like it's a public waterfront, you may provide additional offsets for more subjective impacts. Moving on to the height offsets. To quantify the offsets for building height, the city has developed a process to determine net new shadow. The new shadow for 1 hour on October 23rd that would be created by a project above the existing building shadows and a Chapter 91 compliant building on that site. We have discussed 2 of the 3 matrices here before. The first one is similar to the one that we have for the open space. The larger the magnitude of net new shadow impacts, the larger the per square foot offset. Again, that's an attempt to try and rein in the shadow impacts of a project. If it's impossible to do that, then the per square foot offsets go up. Also, location is important, with a higher per square foot offset in specific areas of concern, for example, public open space. And then a third one that has come out of various discussions with this group is to try and avoid net new shadow in premium public area. Oops, sorry about that. Premium public areas through building design and orientation. A couple of the areas we've talked about have been Christopher Columbus Park and the end of Long Wharf. So the offsets to impacts of building heights must make the ground level environment conducive to water-dependent uses, which includes public access, use of the harbor walk, other pedestrian access, and certainly be applied to a broader range of public benefits than we saw with the open space offset, which has been focused on open space. Some potential examples include, and these come out of what we've heard from the committee, from the listening sessions and charrettes, water transportation facilities and or subsidies above those required for Chapter 91 license. Climate change has been a significant topic with this group, so measures that address that with direct public benefits. This one we want to be a little bit careful about, because if they're tied to a building's construction, then we may not see them implemented until later. So we want to be careful about that if we're using that as an offset. And then special public destination facilities. These are facilities of public accommodation with specific requirements that enhance that the committee develops with the city, that enhance the waterfront by either serving significant community needs, attracting a broad range of people, and providing innovative amenities for public use. So offsets for building height, a little bit different than for open space. And I think that's the end of the framework presentation.
Any questions from the advisory committee? So when you speak, can everyone who speaks please identify yourself?
Joanne Hayes, Ryan's Friends of Christopher Columbus Park. Can you just clarify the definition of open space? Is it literally on the ground, or are there times when maybe there's something elevated that they would say that's public open space, but it's not on the ground?
I think you run into real problems trying to justify open space that is elevated as open space. You can do that through other offsets, but in the past, efforts to include non-ground level open space as open space for a municipal harbor plan have not been successful.
Other comments, questions? Not comments, questions? Anyone else? Okay. And I think you're done. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just a similar technical question. One of the most magnificent parts of the harbor is under the dome at Rose Wharf. Is that open space now?
No, it has to be free to the sky. It doesn't mean you can't have that as an offset, just not as an open space offset. You might want to do it as a shadow impact. You might want to do it as not as a one-for-one open space impact, but just say you had a large horizontal building that blocked a lot of the waterfront, or that was proposed for the waterfront, but they met the 50% open space. You could use that provision that I had in italics to say, yeah, you meet the 50%, but it still doesn't accomplish the goals of what we're trying to achieve. So we want you to put in a giant archway, but it would not count to the open space.
Okay, any other questions? All right, so while the Chiofaro Company and the team come up to get ready for their presentation, a couple of things. I'm Vivian Lee, I'm the acting chair. The next 45 minutes, up to 45 minutes, the Chiofaro Company will give a presentation. At the end of their 45 minutes or sooner, we will then take questions, first from the committee, then from the public. After the clarifying questions, then we will open up for comments, again, starting with the committee and then to the public. Mayor Walsh and the BRA want to be sure that everyone who wants to speak has an opportunity to speak. Therefore, you're going to be brief and to the point. If someone has already made the point, you just say, I agree with Mary Ann, I agree with Bud, or whatever, and just, we don't have to repeat it 10 times. And the reason I'm saying that is we want to be sure that we capture as many of the comments as possible. So we want to be sure everyone has a chance to speak and such. So we're going to ask you to be brief, and if someone has said it already, you guys say pass, or it's already been covered, okay? So I'm going to try to be done by 5 o'clock, so we're going to keep this going. And I'm running the clock for the 45 minutes, so.
I'm Don Chiofaro. I want to thank Rich and Chris and the members of the committee and the friends and neighbors from our neighborhood. It's great to be back in front of the committee and the community again, and I'm excited about the ideas we're about to share with you today. When we last spoke back in September, I made an announcement that my son just had twins. My son is here today. The twins are now 9 months old, and everybody's doing very well. We also shared with you our thoughts about the public realm possibilities at the Harbor Garage site and how we might best be able to achieve Chapter 91's primary goal of increasing public accessibility to the waterfront. Now, we talked about 3 options for the future of the garage. We could leave it as is, make cosmetic changes, and do our best to program the first floor retail. Or we could build on top of the garage, adding residential units and maintaining the existing structure as a podium. Or we could completely reimagine the site by tearing it down, tearing the existing garage, and constructing an entirely new project. We asked for your feedback, and over the last 9 months, we received it. You liked the creative thinking about the public realm. You weren't very excited about the hot tubs. But most importantly, given the choice, no one wants to see the garage stay. That said, we also understand that there are many who are reserving judgment until they hear about what we propose to replace the garage with. That's only fair. So today, with the benefits of 9 months of discussion as to our collective vision for this part of the waterfront, we're here to begin the conversation and move it forward. From the first charrette, the process has been about aspiration, about possibilities, about bold thinking as to what the downtown waterfront could be. The public realm plan we've been working with together with you for over a year sums it up nicely, and I quote from the city's presentation: "The downtown waterfront should be a premier waterfront location, a destination in North America." We shared that vision, and we're committed to creating a wow. Wow is the descriptor many have used when trying to explain what they'd like to see on the site. As with our initial presentation, we will continue working from the ground up and describe how we think reimagining a site with 0 open space today can ultimately provide so many of the benefits contemplated by the MHP objectives and the public realm. What you are about to see represents our vision for creating visual and physical connectivity and permeability, an abundance of public amenities, and a new vitality where there is now an activity gap on the waterfront and on the Greenway. This is a vision for producing a destination for all Bostonians, as well as the many visitors who come to our city every day. Now, to accomplish these goals, we're going to share with you an economically viable program, including square footages and approximate heights, that would allow us to really build something and unlock the site's potential. As we've said consistently, any development scenario that contemplates putting $180 million in the ground to demolish the building and rebuild it below grade, demolish the garage and rebuild it below grade, must be significant in scope in order to convert vision to reality. And any significant project will bring with it opportunities as well as trade-offs. Our guiding principle in finding an appropriate balance is simple: design a slender, elegant form that will maximize open space and view corridors while incorporating optimal floor plates for the uses inside. The end result will be a project that makes the most of the location with world-class architecture that reflects the city on one side and the harbor on the other. We've been studying the form that this program might take and have a number of conceptual images to share with you for feedback, including, among other things, a one-of-a-kind open space that truly is groundbreaking and would become the city's next great public space. Now, substitutions for height and open space will be necessary, as has been said, precisely as Chapter 91 intended, and as all Bostonians, as all of Boston's other major waterfront projects have required. But we are confident that the unprecedented benefits that can be provided from this project will more than offset the impacts. Now, before I turn the presentation over to the design team, I want to emphasize that what you will see today at the ground level and above, concepts only. Though we've done a lot of thinking and our team has produced some incredible images, we're not bringing you a complete design or a concrete proposal. We still have a lot of work to do, but our intent today is to provoke a thoughtful discussion and gather your input. We want to bring the people of Massachusetts and beyond to our downtown waterfront. This is the mission of Chapter 91, and we've made it our mission as well. We want to create a place that excites the senses, that educates the mind, that energizes the harbor and the greenway. And we think we've done some pretty exciting, we have some pretty exciting ideas for making this happen. I would like to now turn the program over to Fred Kramer of Ad Inc. and Trent Tesh of Cohn, Bettis & Fox to talk in more detail about our approach and our ideas. Fred.
Thank you, Don. Good afternoon, committee members, and good afternoon, public and guests. We're happy to have you here. I'm going to take a brief moment and tell you what's in store for you. We're going to talk about some guiding principles. Very brief reminder. I think most of you know these things, but it bears restating what the goals are for this site as well as for this district. I'll talk a little bit about the Harbor Garage in context, broader context, macro on the one hand, micro on the other, and we'll talk a little bit about the development program and the design concepts. Trent will do that. Public benefits and offsets, I'll come back, and then Dawn will conclude. We're going to move expeditiously because I believe Vivian when she said she's going to cut us off in 45 minutes. So we've collaborated with KPF on other projects. We were participants together with the Seaport Public Realm Plan and Master Planning, and we do pursue work from time to time here in Boston together in particular, and I'm happy to be joined by Trent to do this discussion. So let me, without further ado, I'm going to go pretty quickly through these two, okay? But you can stop me if you feel I'm rushing. I may not read all of them either. The MHP objective from the City of Boston's request for the notice to proceed: increase public access to the waterfront, improve activation and year-round programming, enhance connections between the waterfront, the greenway, and the adjacent communities, facilitate a greater building density and diversity of uses that complement the unique open space resources of the district. From the Public Realm and Watershed Activation Plan, vision for the downtown waterfront, district-wide vision, multimodal accessibility, clearly defined connections, climate change resilience, four-season destinations and programming, flexibility to accommodate innovation. The Long Central Wharf Sub-District Vision. This drawing simply is a reminder of how important it is to preserve issues including view corridors from Milk Street, the Gateway, active retail-heavy programming, opportunity to vastly improve the public space between the garage and the harbor, including on the BRA land. The Long Central Wharf Subdivision Vision, in essence, is creating an exemplary 21st century waterfront, so generations to come can experience the water's edge. And the theme is really touch the water. Let me take a minute and put the garage site in greater context. If you see the red dot, as Don mentioned in his opening remarks, in order to undertake the significant investment of replacing a functioning, revenue-producing investment By demolishing it and rebuilding it below grade, the new project will be significant in scope. We're not going to be cute today and hide what we believe is necessary to do what will make a difference on this site. So I will simply tell you that the tallest point of our new project will be in and around 600 feet. This actually can't be any taller than that. That is, in fact, what the Federal Aviation Administration puts forth as a hard cap on the height of structures in this location. But in order to truly open up the site and do some of the spectacular things we want to do at the ground level, we need that height. In addition, in order to address the financeable, constructible, marketable project that Don spoke about, we're going to require significant density on that site. To be economically viable, a ground-up redevelopment of the kind that we're talking about here will need to contain approximately 1.3 million square feet of gross floor area. So admittedly, it's not a small project, but that said, I want to talk a little bit about why we think this particular site in this particular time is appropriate for a significant project. This may even be an ideal site for the project that we're talking about, and we think in many ways it is, and I'll talk a little bit about that too. So there's the Harbor Garage on the red dot, located with respect to Boston's urban core. It sits at the extreme east edge of the historic Shawmut Peninsula, right on the harbor front. I'll use the slide to reference a planning concept that many of you are familiar with, but perhaps not all of you are familiar with, but which has particular relevance in connection with the Harbor Garage site. And in the aftermath of the devastation of entire neighborhoods as a result of mid-1900s urban renewal, planners, architects, and civic leaders in Boston came together to conceive a concept that would allow the city to continue to grow while sparing the existing urban fabric of tightly knit residential communities. The idea was to concentrate development in those underutilized areas above rail yards, on turnpike air rights, and later in place of parking structures, where density could be accommodated without displacing residents. This concept came to be known as the high spine. So 50 years later, the high spine concept has been successful in many ways in channeling height and density into fairly well-defined corridors and locations, extending on an east-west axis from the Prudential Center on the left to the financial district on the right of the drawing of the picture in front of you. What's interesting is that the precision with which this collection of tall buildings has aligned along this axis. A new western bookend was recently spoken about in the Globe, approved for construction at the Christian Science Center complex, 700-foot plus multifamily housing tower. Moving east from there in almost perfect alignment, the Crew, the Hancock Building, the New Millennium Tower at Downtown Crossing, and on the eastern end, at the terminus of the spine on the harbor, is the Harbor Garage site. If I take a look at more closely, if I look at the the north-south axis, there are actually two north-south axes I'll talk about very briefly. Within the MHP planning area, the site is at the center of various important landmarks, extending from Christopher Columbus Park in the north to Rose Wharf and Seaport Boulevard in the south. The garage site is right at the geographic heart of this district, but it also sits in the center of a second north-south axis, which runs along the Greenway from North Station to South Station. And it bears mentioning that a 600-foot building has been approved at each of those multimodal transportation intersections. The site's positioning within walking distance of each of the city's commuter rail terminals is important for another reason as well. Besides its accessibility to every suburban train commuter from the north and south shores, as well as Amtrak travelers, the garage sits practically atop the MBTA Aquarium Blue Line station, is mere feet from every suburban commuter boat terminal, and is directly across the harbor from Logan Airport. And lest we forget, it's still adjacent and accessible to an interstate highway, only now it's one that we're also pleased is below grade rather than above grade. The positioning is important because it demonstrates that the site is about as transit-oriented as it can get in our city. And clustering density around transit-friendly sites is good urban planning and good traffic planning, and makes a great deal of sense. Let's take a closer look at the context and the immediate surroundings of the garage site. Here, once again, we see the site positioned at the intersection of the east-west and north-south axes. Directly across the greenway is the financial district, the most dense neighborhood in the city, and most concentrated collection of height. Within a few blocks of the site are buildings of 350, 400, 500, and 600 feet, with 400-foot tall harbor towers buildings located directly adjacent to the site. I point this out only to suggest the following, especially now that the elevated artery has been removed, the nearby context of the garage to one side of the garage is already particularly dense and urban in nature. We stand on the roof of the garage, if we stand on the roof of the garage and we look to the west, there's distinctively an urban scene characterized by both height and density. There's also a very unique attribute of the site. It's literally surrounded by acres of permanent open space, Christopher Columbus Park, the Greenway, the Aquarium Plaza, the Harbor Walk, the Harbor Towers lawn and pool, and of course the harbor itself. Even by adding an extremely dense project on this particular site, the downtown waterfront is not in any danger of becoming a particularly dense neighborhood. These next slides that I'll share with you will I hope, help to define what it is further that I was just speaking about. There's a concept emerging in the urban environment called neighborhood density. Density really only matters at one particular site as it relates to the contextual density of the neighborhood as a whole. The slides that I'm going to show you show the following. Comparative 11-acre areas of the downtown waterfront centered on a hypothetical 1.3 million square foot redevelopment of the garage site and including the immediate environs. And the floor area ratios of these comparative analyses is approximately 4.48, 4.5. But I will tell you, if you just look quickly at the Harbor Garage site, Fan Pier, and Atlantic Wharf, I'll just ask you to pause for a second and see the difference as it relates to the density of ground coverage and open space in the Harbor Garage area versus Fan Pier versus Atlantic Wharf. So I do that primarily to remind everybody that density and lot coverage are very important concepts. Fan Pier is a much larger site, but when you center the 11-acre snapshot like we did for the Harbor Garage, on the part of the site where the greatest density is clustered, you get a neighborhood FAR of 5.4. The takeaway is simply that combined with an extraordinarily transit-friendly nature, the Harbor Garage is particularly well suited to accommodate high densities without fundamentally densifying the surrounding area of the waterfront to an extent any greater than other recent successful waterfront developments. Before we move on to the development program and design concepts, I'm just going to show quickly, in no uncertain terms, where this site is as it relates to that north-south and east-west axis, the natural termination. In context, if I look at things in our city that have been approved and are coming online, it's a view of the city skyline from Cambridge. It's a graphic that the Globe actually published a few weeks ago. You've probably seen it. It shows in red the various buildings along the east-west axis, approved for heights of over 600 feet. We've inserted a conceptual massing of the Harbor Garage redevelopment on the left to show how it fits into the citywide context. And I'll leave you with one thought that I found interesting. It was a quote from Robert Campbell, who noted Boston Globe critic, architecture critic, who wrote back in 2006 about the vision and success of the high spine concept. He cited a report from the BSA's Committee on Civic Design from 1961, and it included this passage from his column. He said, "The future spine would be interrupted by two squares, Copley and Park. It proposes that two new ones be added at the spine's ends. One would be a green extension of Kenmore Square. The other would be a great south square at the place where the spine reached the water. We haven't quite gotten there, but Rose Wharf is a beginning." I found that interesting as it relates to how Boston continues to grow and compete as a world-class city, and where density and where height comes in order to allow it to do so. It's my pleasure now to turn this over to Trent to describe our vision, our team's vision, for creating this great square, a harbor square, a grand eastern terminus for the high spine where it reaches the waterfront, and a bookend to the height and density now being created at the Christian Science Palace. Thank you. Trent.
Thanks, Fred, Don. Before we begin, I would like to just say how truly exciting it is to be an architect involved in this very special process. I think that this is a really exciting project. And over the past several months, we have thought long and hard about how to achieve something special here, something transformative. The charge from the Chiofaro team has been consistent. Visibility from the city to the harborfront, the creation of a dramatic and transformative place, and activation of the public realm. To this end, our team has engaged in an effort to seek out the very best ideas and strategies in joining building form to this very important location on the downtown waterfront. At the forefront of any design, there needs to be at least three things present: stamina, a site, and a program. I have the stamina, I think, you, the site, and from Don Chiofaro team, the program. Laid out before you is a true mixed-use building program consisting of 700,000 square feet of office, a 250 to 350 key hotel, 120 residential apartments, approximately 3 levels of retail, and the replacement of 1,400 parking spaces. At KBF, it's a natural part of our process to study and compare the distribution of space. We call it the comparative process. Here you see our recent study of locating a program in 1 and 2 building configurations. There are 2 main takeaways from this slide. First, although we have actively been studying a number of options for the design of the vertical elements, we have not yet settled on one. And second, this study made it clear that in order to accommodate the entire program with marketable floor plates, while remaining below the FAA height limit, the best solution to be a simple normative 2-building approach. How then do we join the program to this specific site, the downtown waterfront? We thought of 2 contrasting strategies. The first approach, shown here, we call bricks. It is a strategy that maximizes the ground floor, biasing internal space over exterior visual porosity. So while this strategy has a great potential for retail and building lobby, it lacks in visual porosity. We also feel this approach presents a static and state image, one that may feel heavy and massive for this specific site. Here are a few views that we tested to show how this approach would look and feel. We can all probably agree that this approach is not much better than the existing garage. A good precedent in Boston might be the McCormick Post Office, built in 1933. It presents a solid full block extrusion and very little to offer in terms of visual porosity. At the other end of the spectrum, we have stilts. This method locates the building mass 80 to 100 feet in the air, propped up by columns. Unlike bricks, the majority of the site is open to views beyond, with very little activity to draw you to the site. While stilts may have great promise with views, we find it lacks in engaging the city and may even look like a cold corporate plaza. We didn't think that this approach would work here for such a vivid and memorable site. It feels rather cold and hostile. So, and to show you a precedent, we found this precedent in Chicago from mid-century modernist Bertrand Goldberg, Astor Tower. It was built in 1963 as a boutique hotel, serving the celebrity of the day. This design purposely built its first floor as its fifth, relegating the ground floor to columns and a lift lobby. Looking at these ideas side by side, we see clearly the advantages and the disadvantages. Our job, it seems, is to find a solution somewhere in the middle where we select only the positive attributes of activation and visual porosity. The challenge then, for us all, is to synthesize these 2 ideas of visibility and activation. We start, however, by looking at the real problem of the site, the harbor garage. In this diagram, you see a generic pair of buildings atop a podium of the same dimension as the harbor garage. The first transformation, the first of a series of transformations, opens an east-west corridor through the middle of the site on axis with the water sheet beyond. The dimension of the slot approximates the dimension of a typical Boston street. The second transformation cuts a southwestern corner, allowing views to important buildings around the site. Here we expose views to Rose Wharf. The third transformation opens a dramatic view from the northern edge of the site, connecting Rings Fountain to the water sheet beyond. The fourth transformation cuts the southeastern corner of the site to expose waterfront amenities such as the New England Aquarium and the IMAX Theater. We feel this transformation also creates a spatial buffer between the adjacent harbor towers. Our fifth transformation opens up even further the space at the center of the site. We feel that this transformation will allow greater flow and openness to the site to the water sheet. Introducing Harbor Square, seasonal public open space, a space to be used year-round. The erosion of the podium achieves approximately 27,000 square feet of useful open space, designed specifically for this site like a tailored suit. At the center of this site, we want to create one of Boston's most used and loved waterfront spaces. To achieve this goal, we have designed a canopy that slides out of the footprint of the building when the weather turns cold and windy. Here you see a precedent in Salt Lake City. It shows an outdoor space with canopy fully open, and here fully closed. Early morning, looking east, we see the sun rise over the harbor. There is a fresh, crisp quality to the air, and spring is in full bloom. Harbor Square is having a flower show. And in the summer, a lawn party. And in the fall, a farmer's market. And at the heart of Boston's toughest season, winter, we celebrate the season in a grand space that looks back to the heart of the city. To paint a more vivid and accurate picture of Harbor Square, we want to compare it to other places, both dimensionally and spatially. The Grand Rose Wharf Rotunda is 40 feet wide and 55 feet high. Harbor Square measures, at its largest dimension, 167 feet wide by 66 feet high, and at its smallest dimension, 70 feet wide and 66 feet high. Harbor Square could easily accommodate the skating rink at Rockefeller Center. Harbor Square has a slightly larger dimension than the Time Warner Center in New York. Imagine here at Columbus Circle, instead looking back to a view of the Grain Exchange. Harbor Square is also similar in dimension to the pedestrian space at Faneuil Hall Marketplace between the Quincy Market and South Market buildings. The ground floor plan achieves a harmonious balance between built area and public open space. The built space is roughly 29,000 square feet, while the open space tracks 27,000 square feet. Activated on all four edges, the design aims to maximize the potential of the site and heighten the awareness of the harbor. The best way to understand the design is a direct comparison of views of the garage's current status on the site and what it could be. From Atlantic Avenue, the garage in its concrete splendor.
Some of us like it.
Transformed into something open and inviting with views through to the harbor. The garage looking southeast at Milk Street. Transformed into a building that invites people to pass through and connect to the harbor beyond. The garage looking northeast near the harbor towers. Transformed into a building with active edges, rooftop gardens, and openings that allow vistas to amenities beyond. And finally, the garage from the water sheet. Transformed into a place where one can finally touch the water and a place that opens up to the city beyond. Thank you, and now I would like to hand the presentation back to Fred Kramer, who will review potential offsets and public benefits.
Thank you, Trent. I'm going to also move relatively quickly through these slides, primarily to make some points that are quite obvious and quite clear of where we will directly impact, where we may indirectly impact, and where we may, in support with other people in the neighborhood, influence the public benefits received. I'll also talk a little bit about substitutions and offsets. So looking at some of the documents that came out in the Public Realm and Watershed Activation Plan, what we tried to do, and you don't read this, I don't have to read it either, we basically took all of the guideline information and we looked at how our project stacked up against it. I'm not going to read these for the next few slides that may show this, but I'll pull from it to make a specific example out of one of the things that we think we do extremely well. So if you just take this particular focus point, and I have four focus points to cover, it talks about creating a range of open spaces. If we look at the sub-district as it is today, 63% of that sub-district land area is deemed to be open space. We know that none of that is at the Harbor Garage. The plan proposes over 27,000 square feet of open space, bringing the total in the sub-district to approximately 67%. The vast majority of that new open space is one-of-a-kind open space that can be used all year long. We have the opportunity as well to play a central role in realizing many of the district-wide public benefits identified in the Public Realm and Watershed Activation Plan. I'm not going to go there, so let me talk about increasing four-season activities. We believe that with respect to that, our plan is not only unique, but will enrich the significant pedestrian traffic with true four-season space and very exciting and appropriate programming for the public realm. Likewise, creating view corridors to the water, we believe that we support these benefits, including those view corridors, and I think I don't have to restate what Trent already showed you, that we have a significant number of new access physical and visual views to and from the waterfront, and to and from the waterfront back to the Greenway and back to the city. We also believe that we quite significantly have the opportunity to help with the activation of underutilized parcels, in particular the Long Wharf parcel. For example, we can assist in the conversion of the Long Wharf parking lot to a park, and we are in a very unique position to do so in that we could possibly accommodate the cars that park there now in the new underground garage that we've talked about so far. There is no question in our mind that the 21st century climate change resilient waterfront is an absolute requirement of going forward cities as it relates to competing and as it relates to value, not only as it relates to how we address the waterfront specifically, but also how we employ evolving state-of-the-arts and continually dynamic site measures like elevated and protected and redundant mechanical systems and a wide range of other measures that are fast becoming industry practice post-Sandy. And our city is taking that extremely seriously at the leadership level, as are all of the design professionals in the city. Certainly Trent's team in New York is well versed on these issues as well. These are just some of the ways that we think the removal of the garage and the development of a new 21st century mixed-use space at the Harbor Square can help to meet many of the public realm benefit goals identified in the plan. So, very quickly, benefits on the left, we talked about every single one of those, some potential offsets on the right. We can't promise all of these things at this particular point in time, but we're quite convinced that the project we're envisioning has the ability to do the things on the left directly or indirectly or with support from others, and the significant number of potential offsets on the right-hand side is where I will leave it. And I thank everybody for listening to our presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Dawn to wrap us up.
As you can imagine, this is an incredibly exciting time in our neighborhood. For over 25 years, Ted and I have spent our days and many long nights in the community. We've watched it transform before our eyes, and we're committed into doing our part in a continued transformation. At International Place, we've rededicated ourselves to offering amenities like the Palm Restaurant that support a first-class business environment, but also contribute to the community. Meanwhile, at the Harbor Garage, we've been working to make small changes that make a real difference. Design Museum Boston joined us this past winter, and in so doing became the 7th exhibiting museum within a square mile, but the first open on the Greenway. And just last week, Marshall's Farm Stand began offering its selection of fresh local produce for the summer season. As you can tell, we've been focusing on reimagining both International Place and the Harbor Garage. And this municipal harbor planning process presents us with a truly historic opportunity to imagine the possibilities for creating the exemplary 21st century waterfront. The BRA and UTL have done a fabulous job of distilling the community's feedback into a public realm plan that, if implemented, will result in a downtown waterfront that will serve as an example for the world. And we know that the Harbor Garage redevelopment project can and should be the driving force in the plan's implementation. Now, as Carlos and Rich have noted in the past meetings, the economic feasibility of a particular development is not a consideration that you'll find expressly referenced in the municipal harbor plan regulation. However, the public realm plan implicitly recognizes its importance because no fewer than 41 of the public benefits listed in the plan are linked at least partially to a significant development. Therefore, to convert the public realm plan from a vision to a reality and to ensure the goals of the MHP itself can be realized, significant development needs to occur. And significant development can only occur if it is economically feasible, operationally feasible, and financeable. Now, we've learned from our previous trip down this road. In 2008 and 2009, we proposed a building that was 780 feet tall, 1.5 million square feet, and we heard the criticism loud and clear. As a result, we've embraced the guiding principles of the MHP process, and we've rethought our project. We've reduced the density by 200,000 square feet. We've reduced the height by nearly 200 feet. We've completely changed the way the building meets the public realm. And though our target is the smallest project that's feasible, we know that this is no small project. And we know that late in the day, late in October, a redeveloped harbor garage project like the one we've described today will cast that new shadow. But the municipal harbor plan is about much more than shadow alone. It's really a study, value, judgment of the trade-offs inherent in a significant development, the trade-offs between impacts and benefits. When all said and done, the MHP regulation requires that you, as a committee, and ultimately the BRA and the state, will have to decide whether the concepts we've shared with you today will produce a ground-level environment that is conducive to the use of and public access to downtown Boston waterfront. We have every expectation that we'll be required to offset all of the 1 hour net new shadow produced by our project. We just ask that the municipal harbor plan gives us the opportunity to do so. Now, the reality is this committee has the power to ensure that the garage remains in place for generations to come, maybe forever. Or conversely, to open the door for the garage to come down and become a place that captures the imagination of Boston and the world. So now, I invite you to imagine with me. Imagine vitality where now there is precious little. Imagine world-class architecture on our harbor instead of a concrete monument to the car. Imagine a place that delivers on Chapter 91's promise to connect all of the people of the Commonwealth, of the city, of the neighborhoods of Boston to their waterfront, one that capitalizes on transit-friendly location and doesn't add one single new parking place. Imagine over 27,000 square feet of open public spaces where currently there is none. And imagine if when the cold wind starts to blow off the harbor, when the hawk comes out, we can comfortably continue to enjoy those spaces. Imagine a place that contributes a dynamic mix of uses to the most mixed-use district of the city. Imagine a project that converts the vision of the public realm into reality, not in decades, but today. And imagine a catalyst that not only brings unprecedented benefits to the waterfront, but also generates millions of dollars for middle-class housing and other worthy initiatives across the city. All of this is what we imagine for the Harbor Garage site. We're still only in the early stages, and so we invite you to imagine along with us. And thank you, and we look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Let's start off, as I said, with if anyone has clarifying questions. So we're not discussing comments, something you didn't understand, you want to clarify. And then we're going to immediately go into comments. So starting with the committee, anyone have a question? Okay, Jim?
Thanks, Vivian. You talked about the programming of the space in the middle, down the middle of the site. Can you just talk a little bit about what can happen on the ground, on the corners of the site, where the other kind of diagonal view corridors go?
Well, those cuts would just be open space, and they would be open so that people could get visual access and also movement to the watershed. But it's still open for what specifically could happen on each of those corners, probably based on what's happening in the podium at that position in the building itself.
I would say we'd be open to suggestions for uses in those two corners that have been opened up.
When you walk down or drive down Atlantic Avenue in front of this building right here, you see Nebo on a nice night, you see all the people that are enjoying it. Just think about the cafes and the activity that you could have on the waterfront and on the edges of the site.
Anyone else on the committee? Just identify yourself.
Suzanne LaVoy, Wharf District Council. Could you explain where the entrance to the garage would be, and also the service accommodations?
I can't, because we haven't designed it. And it's probably something that we should have pointed out. What we did do, however, and there is a slide, a ground floor slide, that shows that on the East India Road side, there is a residential lobby. And the East India Road side, that is a residential tower, so there's a hotel lobby and a residential lobby. And on the other side, Milk Street is the office lobby. But we haven't thought about any of those issues. We know we have to. We know that our friends and neighbors at Harbor Towers are concerned, and they have a strong opinion about where the garages are and where the truck docks are. We haven't done it yet. We expect that we'll get into it when and if we get into the Article 80 process.
Mary Ann Connolly, I represent the Mass Water Resources Authority. I have a question, and I'm not sure who I direct it to. Could be the BRA, could be the Chiofaro Company, or even ourselves. I was at the site getting off the ferry last week, and was really struck by the density of the IMAX theater. And as we're trying to be bold and looking at how we best provide view corridors and connections to the harbor, I wonder whether there's been any thought about incorporating it into the new development, moving it into another development, or anything like that.
You probably ought to turn the question to Bud Riss.
Well, I spoke.
I'm a private citizen.
I spoke to Bud about it, but he told me that he just left.
Yeah, well, we didn't get into, but it's in there, it's embedded in there, the thought that we consider the Aquarium Plaza, our neighbors at the aquarium, clearly our neighbors at Harbor Towers, the Greenway, and Christopher Columbus Park, all part of our neighborhood, and that we expect to be involved and helpful in sort of the best and highest uses of all of that. So to the extent that the IMAX ever becomes a conversation piece, we certainly would be more than willing to participate in the most constructive way, discussion and conclusion on that.
Thank you. Joanne Hayes Rhines, Friends of Christopher Columbus Park. Did I hear correctly that there is not any additional parking?
That's correct. There are 1,400 cars, and you bring up an excellent point. If all we were doing were to build the project that the program at 700,000 square feet, 120 condos, 250 to 300 hotel rooms, we wouldn't need 1,400 cars. We'd need 700 cars. All right? We're building 1,400 cars for two reasons. One, Harbor Towers has an inclination that they need more than the cars that they currently use. It's not a criticism, it's just a fact. And that the aquarium has a peak use of about 500 cars at the point. So if you add up those two numbers and on what we would use, then you come to a number that's bigger than that, all right? But the point is, we're not going to add any more parking, and if we could, we would minimize parking. And this is a site that actually, you know, in the future might be, because it's so transit-oriented, it might not need as much parking. I mean, who really knows what the future of parking is in any city?
Okay, other clarifying questions? Bud, and then Bruce, and then
But Russ, you obviously spent a lot of time with the concept of the high-rise spine through Boston, and I see how you extended it. What about the historical context of this particular area, ranging from the Custom House to Long Wharf, you know, and all the other features in this area that are the sort of dominant history of the area?
Well, thank you for the question. I think that there's not a city in the country, and Boston is no exception, there's not a city in the world that isn't grappling the relationship between how it continues to grow and the beauty and the charm and the precious assets that we have in this city in particular related to historic assets. So I don't think they're mutually incompatible. You remember I mentioned quite a bit about the open space in and around this neighborhood, relationships to other buildings, view corridors, all of those things I think are mission critical. It's what makes our city so special. So anytime there's a new piece of real estate and a new design opportunity and a way for our city to grow, we all feel the need to respond and relate to those historic assets in a responsible fashion. It's a fact, Boston's a pretty tight city. So almost everywhere you build, we're grappling with how to respond to those existing conditions. I don't know if the fellows have anything else they would add.
Bruce?
This one's, thanks. Thanks for the thoughtful presentation. I have two questions, and I think they're fairly simple. The first is a timing question. If you had a permit today, how long do you guys think it would take you to build? And the second, and I'll ask them both, is, I mean, we're not looking at a tiny investment here. I just figure that with you add what you paid for the garage with what it's going to cost to tear it down and just build the garage part underground, it's going to be a significant investment. Could you give us an order of magnitude number of the amount of money that you guys are looking to invest in the city?
Sure, Bruce. Thanks for the question. The total cost of the project we estimate to be $1 billion. The construction period of the billion, as you can do the math, is about $330 million below the ground and the land value itself. And the construction period should be about 3 years.
Rick, you had a question?
Yeah, I wanted to get some clarification on the forces, the nature of the space and the contracting roof. Can you explain the kind of technology and also the intent of that four-season space relative to, you showed one image where it happened before. Is it we have good confidence that that can happen with this project?
I'm gonna let someone behind me talk about the technology, because we've studied alternatives. It's not an exotic technology, but I want to emphasize a point. It's open to the sky because that's what the regulation wants. And if we are not successful in in convincing everybody that the better end result is to close it when it rains rather than sit out in the rain or the snow, or try to have a good time on a bad day. I mean, you know, Rose Wharf the arch is beautiful, but you know, on January 15th, when the wind is blowing, nobody's standing there. And but this is going to be open to the public, so that it's going to be like the street at Faneuil Hall when you close up the cafes and the bars close up. You're going to be able to walk right down that street every day, any time, all day, all night, 12 months a year.
And technical, when we first had this idea, we had the same impression that you can't do something that's crazy and that will only work once, and then it'll never work again. So we looked at a very simple mechanism of creating telescoping panels that are very simple gables. It's kind of off-the-shelf stuff. And then an interstitial space between a mechanical floor and section and before the first floor of the office building would start would almost be like a shed, we call it the skylight shed, where they would retract into that space adjacent to the base of the building and the services core. So they all stack quite neatly in the building footprint. So we have kind of conceptually worked it out, and I don't think it's something that would be very difficult to build.
Okay, we're going to move to one more, and then we're going to move to the audience, please, because we want to give them a chance to ask questions.
Greg Vassal, Greater Boston Real Estate Board. In Don's closing, he made a reference to housing. And I was wondering, for the investment of $1 billion, how would a project of this magnitude help affect housing and housing shortfall in the city?
The sum of the contributions that this project would make towards housing in the city would be a little over $10 million.
The other element of that, it's not part of the MHP process, is that the current garage-based tax is about $1 million. The new project would be about $18 million, and you know, thousands of new jobs.
Okay. Anyone in the audience with a clarifying question before we get to comments? We're just doing clarifying questions. Okay, Steve.
My name is Jim Bath. I'm a lifelong Boston resident, and I live now at Harbor Towers. I'm a little confused about the 27,000 square feet being sort of aimed at for the open space. Since the garage is a zero lot line project, it has no open space itself. The back apron behind the garage on the sea by the IMAX and over into Central Square Wharf, I believe is the 27,000 square feet that you're implying. To me, somebody already owns that space. That's already their open space. So the new project, if it still stays within its zero lot line and claims this 27,000 square feet, it seems to me like it's a double dip. Could you clarify that for me?
The 27,000 feet that we're referring to is all on the land that we own under the harbor garage. No area outside our property boundaries.
Am I next?
You're next.
Is it on? Is it on?
Yep.
I just as a clarifying question, I think many of us in the neighborhood recall the big red ribbon that was on the garage to show where the space between the two planned buildings the last time around was. And I applaud the fact that you've got two of the finest architectural firms in the country involved in this now. But can you tell us, other than the buildings that are now going to be up to the height that the FAA says is the limit, what the difference is between the two buildings that you're presently proposing and the two ones that you proposed the last time with the red ribbon in the middle? Is the red ribbon going to be in the same place now, and the two buildings in the same place?
You understand the question?
Yeah, first of all, I forget about the red ribbon. I don't even recall.
I think all of your neighbors recall it well.
There are a number of changes. Number one, we had a simple opening. I forget how wide it was. I think it was like 60 feet or 70 feet, straight through. Now what we've done is we've done 4 or 5 very different things. The wall along Atlantic Avenue that is currently the garage is 278 feet long. It's 7 stories high. It's a wall, and you know there's no reason to penetrate it. There's really nothing there unless you go to Marshall's Farm Stand, which you should try today. So what we've done this time around is we've done several different things. We've got a 70-foot. It's a wider opening. It's higher. It's got a roof that can close. It's 167 feet wide along Atlantic Avenue. So it is a funnel. It is an invitation to the 18 million people that come to visit Faneuil Hall, to the millions of people that come to the Greenway, to the hundreds of kids that go to the Rings Fountain, the iconic, precious Rings Fountain, which really we all should be very proud of. It's an invitation to come and visit the sea. Now, if you go and you walk down that street, there are very few places where you could be in South Dakota right now. You won't see the water. Now, as far as what's above, well, we've carved corners off the building. We've created that great visual corner from the Riggs Fountain all the way to the water. So the building is very, very different. And it's porous. You can see through it. It's glass. So there's really no comparison.
Okay. Other clarifying questions?
Joe Benoit, member of Christopher Columbus Park.
Sir, he's got the microphone, so take turns with the microphone. Thank you.
I know you're operating.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm Italian. I live most of the time in Italy and then in Harbor Towers. And I heard before a thing that is quite strange, and Mr. Chiofaro, as he's Sicilian, would understand. My question is, you said that in every place you can, like with this gigantic, beautiful building, build where there is an historical site, and that in every city in the world this happens. I'm quite surprised hearing this, maybe because I see how all over the world, I like traveling a lot, they try to save the historical sites. So where, I know that I come since 20 years in the States, I know how much you are fond of your beginning, and 4 centuries ago, almost everything began in front of here. And I'm trying to understand how you could, not you, Mr. Chiofaro, the gentleman that spoke before, could say a thing like this. Thank you.
I guess I want to make sure I understand the question, so I might ask you to do it further, but I think what I said was that every city in the world and every city in this country is wrestling with how to continue to grow and how to continue to develop and how those developments respond and relate to existing historic fabric. We're not on a historic site per se. So that's what I think you were asking, and that's what I think I said. And if that isn't the case, I'd be happy to discuss it further. But that's my quick response to your question.
Okay. Are there a couple of other questions?
Thank you, Joe Benoit, member of Friends of Christopher Columbus Park and resident of Harbor Towers. On the, if I can get clarification on the parking a bit, 1,400 spaces, and Mr. Chiofaro was mentioning Harbor Towers, obviously we're residential community that's impacted the most. Is there any way that that's going to be separated so that we'll have parking spaces? Any discounts? I know we used to have overnight discounts, but that's been taken away. And that's not a complaint, it's a fact. But what's the story on that?
I think In the audience today is at least one, I think both, two members of the Parking and Garage Committee. We have made a proposal, a conceptual proposal to the Garage Committee to provide the following. Long-term parking for the residents. You currently use about 300 spots. We're going to provide at least 300 spots to lease at a market rate. Number one. Number two, we're going to give you the option to buy condo spots and in our garage. Now, we haven't designed the garage, so we don't know all of the, where it's going to be, but it's all going to be below grade. And so all that other stuff will come out. In terms of discounts, I know you're friends with my friend, the Sicilian. And so the whole question, I'm going to answer you in Sicilian.
Just to follow on that last question, Don, 3-year construction life, have you thought about what happens to the parkers and parking during that construction period?
We know we have an obligation to provide interim parking. We've thought about a variety of different choices. We haven't settled in on any of them. Obviously, if we have the ability to go forward, and we're going to get into that in detail, along with all the other questions that have to do with construction period mitigation. I might as well bring that one up because I know our friends at the aquarium are concerned about that. We recognize that, and we're going to do everything in our power, and we are especially sensitive to the fact that those folks that have lived at Harbor Towers and lived through the big dig, have lived with a lot of construction. So to answer your question, we don't have the answer, but we have an obligation, we recognize it, and we're going to get an answer that's going to be satisfactory to you, we hope.
Okay, other clarifying questions?
I have a clarifying question. Two clarifying points of information. Number one, I actually want to pick up with Mr. Bath left off. Question about open space. The number 27,000 feet of open space was repeated a number of times. If you actually follow the statutory definition of open space, how much of the 27,000 square feet is truly open to the sky versus under the footprint of a building that's simply been carved away? That's question number one. Technical point. And question number two, there was reference to shadow impacts, which of course occur not only on one day a year, we're fortunate, the sun comes up every day, but at least for Chapter 91 purposes, with the October 23rd, is there a diagram showing the shadow impact on the surrounding resources on October 23rd of the proposal based on the massing that you've set forth?
I don't have to tell you that the shadow impact design, a diagram would be determined by the design. We haven't done the design, so we haven't completed the shadow impact. We will. We know we have to, we will. The second question, there is the corners that we cut off, especially the one from the Rings Fountain, to be sure, it's 100 feet above your head. There is a roof at an angle. So perhaps there is the same sort of argument that could be made about the Rose Wharf Arch. It might be made about that corner. If you were to eliminate all those corners that we think are architecturally important, that contribute immensely to the urban plan and the overall importance and appropriateness of the site, then you're left with what's in the middle, and that's about 19,000 square feet. Is that right? 19,000 square feet, and it does reduce the amount of theoretical open space, but it's open space, and if we have to take the roof and keep it open all the time to get to that, that's what we will. It's quite simple.
So one comment.
How far down do you have to dig for those 1,400 spaces, and are you sure it can be done? Because when they did the World Trade Center, that is now defunct, they found out that the water was coming in, had to build a huge slurry wall and everything else.
That subject was actually one of the first subjects that we studied back in 2005 when we were considering this whole idea. And the answer is we have to go down a little over 70 feet to get that much parking. And we have studied it in detail with Haley and Aldrich and have every confidence that it's expensive, but it's doable.
One more.
Questions?
Is there one other pressing question that has to be clarified, because we want to hear from the public on the comments, not on
Marcel Willock, Harbor Towers. Have you an estimate of the increased density? How many people will be, you say 120 condos, 300 hotel rooms, and the office space, how much square feet? So you have an idea of the number of additional people that will be using the site.
Well, I guess we would have to do math. We haven't done that, but the question I thought you were going to ask is, are you increasing the number of people that are going to go there by car? And the answer is no, because we don't have any more parking spaces, and so there aren't going to be any more parking spaces. Now, the people that come that live there will have parking, maybe 1 or 2 cars, but they'll be out of the 14. The people that come to the hotel will probably come by mass transit for the most part, a taxi, Uber, or something like it. Maybe they'll come by car. So so there will be an increased pedestrian activity. There will be increased density, and not only do we expect it. It is exactly what we want to do because it meets one of the objectives of the Municipal Harbor Plan public realm aspiration.
Thank you. My name is Marilyn Benoit, and I'm a Harbor Tower resident for the last 31 years and have seen enormous changes in our neighborhood that are just breathtaking and wonderful and so forth. One of the things that keeps on hitting me, and it kind of is taking off from what the question that Marcel was just asking, is what about the impact on people who are residents of the neighborhood, of this incredibly dynamic project that you are talking about. And we can indeed see that there are world-class architects who are involved and great visionaries, and this is going to have an enormous impact compared to a boring old garage. When you talk about, hundreds or millions or thousands of people coming, I think that some of us who are in the neighborhood are going to be very, very curious about, what it is that this wonderful thing could do in terms of, totally upside downing our neighborhood in terms of residences. So I'm curious about if you have thought about it from that point of view, when you talk about the hundreds of thousands of people who will come to enjoy this. That's a lot of traffic in the neighborhood.
So we're not yet at the detail of the traffic studies and the environmental impact report, right? So this is a municipal harbor planning process, and it's not the environmental permitting process. But this is a question that will obviously come up. I think Tom has the last question, then we're going to pass the mic, and then we're going to get comments. We can't hear.
My name is Tom Palmer. I work with Harbor Towers and have for 5 years. For 5 years, we've been straining to look at this through the lens, any proposal through the lens of what's good for the city and the neighborhood, and not just for Harbor Towers. And in that regard, I just wondered if somebody from the BRA would address whether this proposal, which whatever its promises in terms of offsets sound wonderful, it goes way beyond what the city and state rules would allow in terms of height and density. And I thank you for the candid presentation about those overages. Would this be a precedent for other sites that are currently or in the future in the development process along the waterfront?
So where we are in this planning process, and we've invited the property owners to present their plans on how to improve their properties. We have a vision, our public realm plan that you've all worked on, that makes recommendations on how to improve the waterfront. You may recall at the last meeting, we analyzed what Mary Longwolf was looking for relief from the waterways regulations. And someone from the committee had asked us, what are you looking for? Well, it's an equal or better standard. You know, could we do better than what's there now? Better than what Chapter 91 would allow with a new development? And you have to look at every performance standards, not just shadow, like year-round activation, getting people out to the waterfront. The Greenway Guidelines was a result of taking the artery down and dealing with what was left, including great parkland, but also parking garages that created walls to the waterfront and other neighborhoods. I think our goal is to come up with a design and massing that can get rid of the garage, but also meet the criteria, the state's criteria of activating the waterfront and promoting water-dependent uses and open space. You know, we'll be analyzing this scenario with the standards that Tom went through at the beginning of the presentation, and ultimately the BRA, through guidance from this committee and the public, will come in with a massing that we think is appropriate for the site that protects and promotes the water's edge. So we will analyze what was presented today. I was on the side, so I didn't see exactly the full massing, but you know, we will have those details and come back with an analysis of that.
Okay. We're going to start with the committee. Rick? Okay. Now what's going to happen is we're going to pass the mic down, and then we're going to open up to the public. And you can say pass, or you can say I agree with so-and-so, and just keep going. We need to be brief because I want to be sure the members of the public have a chance to comment as well.
Hi, I'm Lois Siegelman, president of the Friends of the Charlestown Navy Yard, and that's where I live. And I guess the presentation, I appreciate I think it will be a lot nicer than the garage. I just want to make sure that you've accommodated parking. And by parking, I'm not talking about residents or visitors to the hotel, but the fact that there are service vehicles. And that could include moving trucks, which we'll have if you have residents going in and out of there. It'll be the people delivering the groceries, the dry cleaning people, and so forth. And making sure that they're not just all around the building and on the street level, because that's going to block the views that you just spent so much time trying to build. On the way over here, walking, we just happened to pass by, I think it was International Place, where we looked down one of the view corridors, and all you saw was cars and trucks. So it was totally blocked. So that's just my comment on that.
My name is Rick DeVito. I'm the president and CEO of A Better City. We've been spending a long time in this area planning the Greenway, also the edges of the buildings, and also really thinking a lot about this municipal harbor planning effort. And I really want to speak to the urban character and urban form and urban shape that the developers are suggesting relative to this space. And I guess I want to speak to the opportunities of creating something iconic on the waterfront, and the opportunities to realize something that can create a destination and help complement the notion of the waterfront being a place where the public can come, because I think the developers really work to try and achieve that. I'm also very open-minded to the architectural references to the space in relationship to open space, and I absolutely see no problem relative to the architecture opening open space in creative ways. There's many building forms and shapes here in the waterfront and also throughout the city that provide those opportunities that really are very successful as open spaces. I'm very pleased to see the space being a four-season space, because that's one of the things that we're really missing here. I'm also really happy to see the opportunity of getting to the water's edge, which was a public realm objective that I thought we were all looking to achieve, and if we actually get it done, it will be one of the kind of neatest locations that we can potentially offer. Relative to the activation of the space, I think we need to be reminded that the space is already active with 1,400 vehicles that are going in and out of there every day, and the people that are moving in and out of that space every day. And I think I heard the developer say that that's the number of spaces that will be there in the future. I think what we need to know is that space will complement the amount of activity that was currently there and serve as another amenity to the people that are coming. They're coming because we've already done a good job at shaping the space and open space that's in that area. And this will certainly be another opportunity for more people to come and visit. And I think we'll be organized in such a way in which those folks will be able to enjoy a new and special amenity in the city of Boston. So I'm looking forward to that, and I hope we can work together to help realize it.
Thank you. Tom Wooders, I live at Harbor Towers. I've been there for more than 20 years. As most of you know, Harbor Towers is two 40-story buildings, and so I'm not adverse to height. And I think that a development of the garage parcel, a redevelopment of it, has the potential to benefit both the city and the neighborhood, and I think most of the people at Harbor Towers feel the same way. I also applaud the imaginative way that the architects have addressed Chapter 91 concerns about view corridors and open space. And I recognize that the corollary of open space creation is going to be height. And I think that's a reasonable approach. What concerns me, and I think the process may be backwards, and I'm trying to, this is a context for what is really a procedural question. Neither Tom's framework presentation nor this proposal address how you measure or evaluate these trade-offs and substitutions quantitatively. And we are asked as a committee, as a result, to evaluate this proposal without the views of without the benefit of the views of the BRA and its experts on massing and proposed substitution issues. These are critical considerations under Chapter 91 and under the Greenway Planning Guidelines, which were the result of thousands of hours of input from the BRA and the public and consultants to the BRA. Just as a comparison to what's proposed now, Harbor Towers consists of 2 buildings with a combined footprint of about ½ an acre. On a parcel, it's about 3½ acres. So 1/7 of the parcel is building footprint. This garage proposal contemplates 2 towers, each of them approximately equal to the combined area of the 2 Harbor Towers. So it's twice the mass on a third of the land. And that's something which I think deserves serious consideration. Issues of massing, proportionality, appropriateness, and scale all need that examination. And my question is there a plan or is there a process that contemplates that the BRA will put forth its views and those of its consultants on these issues, and then after that allow the committee and the public to weigh in with their views?
So I think we can't respond to every single comment. I think it is the intention of the BRA that we continue this conversation at our next meeting. We should list the concerns in the comments so there can be follow-up between this meeting and the next one. And I think you raised a number of points. Lauren is taking notes, Chris is taking notes, Rich is taking notes, the UTs consultants are taking notes so that we will have the benefit of additional analysis at the next meeting. But we want to, lay out whatever your concerns are so that we can do some homework between them. Lorraine?
Lorraine Downey, South Boston resident and previous chair of the Harbor Park Advisory Committee. I just want to say how I'm really impressed with the design of the structure and the view corridors and the uniqueness of it. One of the things originally when we were doing the zoning for the Harbor Park, and that came back as feedback from residents that I would find just walking along and finding the different connections, was what they loved about it was the uniqueness, that it wasn't all the same, that they took the corner and they saw something different and something unique, and it made them smile. And I think this building will fit that criteria perfectly. I love the 24-hour, 7-day, 12-month-a-year public access, and in a space that can be used 12 months a year, because we don't really have that along the harbor very much. And my other comment is to reinforce Mary Ann's idea to get the IMAX out of there, incorporate someplace else, because it opens up an opportunity for an incredible visual access.
Bill?
I'm going to pass.
I'm Linda Jonash, Director of Planning and Design for the Rose Kennedy Greenway Conservancy. There's so many details to work out yet with this proposal, but the fact that this process is being run and driven by how to optimize the public realm in this space, how to look forward from a public experience standpoint, to not be reactive to saying, chip away at this, don't do that from a negative standpoint, I think is really commendable. You've done a terrific job as opposed to just coming up with an object of a building, and that's the whole conversation, to really thoughtful integration within the overall public realm and the associated spaces. So we look forward to working with you. It's a tremendous opportunity to take down a real eyesore, a dead spot on the Greenway, and do something really, really wonderful. Understanding there's a million details that everyone has concerns that would be worked out, but it's such a great start. And my one question is that the whole issue of carbon footprint of this building and what your goals, objectives are relative to whether it's a platinum LEED certification, efforts towards doing everything from rainwater harvesting to making your impact on the site better. Building technologies now can be better. I would hope that would be right front and center in how you move forward with the design. Otherwise, it's a terrific job. It's exciting to see positive looking forward, and we look forward to working with you.
Joanne Hayes Rhines. I agree that it is very exciting and really thinking, as they say, out of the box. It's very, very clever. One, stepping back on this and looking at where we've been this last year or so, anybody who was along the harbor this past weekend, the weather was gorgeous. And I'm going to tell you, it was activated. You can't walk down Central Wharf. You have to be out on the street. And it's not because of the vendors, it's just because of the number of people. The plaza in front of the aquarium is incredibly busy. And then you've got the duck boats and the pedicabs, and Columbus Park was just buzzing and vibrating. It was wonderful. So as we walk through this and to think about when we add other buildings, other options, at what point are we already at saturation point? Are we close to saturation? How do we accommodate this so that this beautiful city just doesn't come grinding to a halt, not only in traffic, but also in pedestrians, quite seriously. It is very difficult to walk. The Greenway's done a wonderful job with all their the booths on the Greenway. So there's so much going on now that we need to improve it, and I just don't want to see it come to a dead stop. Thank you.
I'm interested in the retractable roof, but from a different perspective. Does the vertical glass on the east end and the west end, does that also retract, or does that remain permanent? Because if it's permanent, I have a real question about whether you're really promoting the kind of access that I think you're trying to do visually and pedestrian to the water. Do you follow me? And secondly, how does that whole atrium work in a climate 50 years from now that's more like Virginia than Boston?
We haven't really designed it specifically yet, but yeah, there's an intent that at the lower ground floor level, like 20 feet to the ground, we'd have sort of like almost like a nano wall that would open up for that 60 feet, and we could pass right through it. But the wall itself wouldn't be able to be on it.
So Trent is taking notes as well, so you want more detail on that. Okay, so.
And I also think, I appreciate your comments on the climate resilience from the sea level rise, et cetera. And I actually like your sort of graceful, just like a personal comment, I like your sort of graceful transition down to the waterfront. But our climate really is changing. We're already a couple of degrees warmer than we used to be. We really are, unless there's a massive, program put in place to reduce emissions. We really are going to be like Virginia in 60 or 70 years. It's also going to be raining a lot more. And when it rains, it's going to be raining a lot harder. We already get 5 inches more rain per year on top of the 50 we get than we used to. So I just asked you to think about it. I presume this building's going to last for 100, 150 years or more.
Mary Ann. Oh, Suzanne, I'm sorry. Suzanne LaFour.
Suzanne LaVoy, Wharf District Council. I want to applaud your vision. I think it's just spectacular. And my only comment is to reinforce what Joanne has said and to say that the major concern that the neighborhood council has, which represents the businesses and residences of the area, is traffic. The impact that we see coming into this community in the last 5 years of people, of buses, and also pedestrians. And I would just ask that moving forward that be a major consideration in anything that is done in this neighborhood, not just the Chiofaro project. That's it.
Mary Ann.
Thanks for presenting this fabulous proposal to us. One thing that I particularly appreciate is that Dawn made it clear that this is just the beginning and that decisions haven't been made, and I think that's the process. And we are looking forward to continuing to flesh these issues and work together to come to a great project. So thank you.
Above and the north end, I like the project. It's come a long way in the last few years. The Jack in the Box, I'm happy it's going. But I know we have 1,000 other questions, and I'm just saying keep up the good work. That's all I have to say.
Jim.
Jim Clockey, Boston Chamber. My brief comment is to endorse what Lorraine said about creating the view corridors and the pedestrian corridors in multiple directions between the Greenway and the water.
Greg, can we have Greg? Okay, go.
John Gambino, Broad Street. I'm very comfortable with what I heard today. Nice job.
Bruce.
Greg Vassell, Greater Boston Real Estate Board. Thank you for a very thoughtful and creative program. We look forward to working with you in the future on this.
Bruce.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually in the position of seconding what everyone at the entire table said about how far it's come. But I do just want to say one thing. I know we have some extremely complicated sort of numeric and other value-driven decisions that we have to make, each of us for ourselves as a committee and going forward. But Rich said something earlier, and I just want to call it out. At the end of the day, this is about equal or better. And for anybody that wants to know whether this is equal or better, we could all walk down and see the Harbor Garage today. It's a remarkable job, guys. Very, very, very nicely done.
Okay, now people in the audience have comments. We're going to start at that end of the room, and we're going to just keep going this way, okay? So you have a comment that hasn't been said, or you want to second what someone says, but it's already been said. We don't need another 5 minutes on that. Because I want to be sure everyone who wants to has a chance to speak. Okay, ready? Go ahead.
Thanks. As a relatively long-time resident of the North End and someone raising a young family in the city, I just want to applaud your vision for trying, all of your BRA, everyone at this table's vision for trying to improve an area that seems to be a bit of a hole in the donut right now. And when you're walking around with young children on a Saturday, it becomes a bit of an intimidating area almost. And just looking at the vision of the Chiofaro Company for what they're trying to do, I think it really can be a great extension of what has already been done with the Greenway and the rest of the downtown area. So thank you.
Dave Kubiak, North End Waterfront Residents Association. I agree with everything that's been said so far. At the same time, this project will move the density of the financial district onto the waterfront.
Anyone else in that part of the room wants to say?
Chris Miller, I live in the North End. Somebody brought up a point about precedent, and I love this project. I think it's perfect, but precedent worries me. I don't think we need 10 of them, and I think we should think about that because how many people end up in a historic district can change the nature of it forever. So that's my comment.
Hi, Kay Bath, Harbor Towers. I guess my one concern is, living in Harbor Towers is, I guess somebody said it before, but I'm going to reiterate it again because to me it's very important, is where the entrance to the garage and all the deliveries will be made, because it's going to be a hotel. And hopefully it'll be away from the residences and on the other side, more closer to the aquarium. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to make that a second note again on that. We need to get more info on that.
I'm Mary Holland. I live at Harbor Towers. And I've also spent years coming to these meetings and went to all the Greenway planning meetings, which the VRA held, and they had consultants as well. I want to know how the specific conclusions of that will be, recommendations will fit into the municipal harbor plan. So that would be the recommendations from that.
So as we have our next meeting, I think Mary's saying we want to be sure that we factor in the Greenway guidelines as we're doing further analysis. Thank you. Chris, do you want to?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Dave Kubiak said about the density of this project. My quick calculation says it has an FAR of about 20 to 25, which is, this is the financial district density. And the waterfront densities are much lower than that. They tend to be around 8 to 12. So it is really an intrusion of high density into the waterfront.
Yes, Cy Mintz is my name, and some of you know me. I actually did the earlier downtown waterfront Faneuil Hall Urban Renewal Plan. That was my job for 4 years, so I know a lot about the waterfront. As Don Chiofaro knows, I've also been involved in other proposals for the garage. At that time, we were concerned about the history of the area, which is a comment that some people have made. However, the history of the area in 1960, when we did the urban renewal plan, is quite different than the 21st century, which is what we should be looking at now. And therefore, based on the presentation that I've seen, even though I did a presentation myself on saving the garage, and there's advantages of that, but they're not the same advantages as what you can see here. There's no way of creating the quality of space, the iconic type of architecture that's certainly possible. This site is absolutely unique, and it's the only site that this waterfront is ever going to see downtown that can create the kind of development that's proposed here. So as somebody who has also lived on the waterfront for 22 years, so I'm a resident just like you, so not only did I work on the plan, I've been eating the plan I've been working on for some time, so I think I have some notion of the area. This is a special site. This site deserves the kind of thing that's being proposed. It's unfortunate it's taken 3 years, Don, and a lot of sweat on the part of a lot of people to get this far. I think that the notion of having these kind of spaces, the open space, the potential of having year-round use, which is nothing that we have. I lived at Harbor Towers. I don't go out there in February, even when I ice skate. So I think that those kinds of things have to weigh heavily, and they weigh heavily, at least to me, to say that if I knew what was being proposed in 1960 to what's being proposed in 2014, we would have endorsed that idea. We never endorsed the idea of the garage that was eventually put there. I'm not criticizing the IMP organization. That's what was proposed. That was 1964, 66, 67, when the economy of this city looked so different than the economy that we have today and the opportunity. So I hope, yes, there are a lot of good questions that have come up here, and they require the kind of work and thought. One thing I can say about Don, he's one of the most thoughtful developers around, even though sometimes we haven't always agreed on things. He does a lot for this neighborhood, and that gives me the confidence that what's shown on the screen is actually going to happen on the ground. And therefore, it's worth supporting this project. I personally support it for what little that's worth.
Thank you. Comment here, Vivian?
Hi, Rita Vania, Harbor Towers. I'm a relatively new resident of Harbor Towers. I absolutely love walking around the Greenway and the Harbor Walk, so thank you everybody who's worked towards that. So a couple of points about this is that we have so many restaurants, so many cafes, so many other commercial establishments. I do not want to see any more commercialization of open space. That's one very important thing that I want to make sure that we, I don't want to have to pay to enjoy open space. That's number one. And the other concern that I have, a question I have, which nobody brought up, was about the HVAC system that for Harbor Towers that actually resides in the garage. So any comments on that would be very welcome.
Okay. Marcel Willock, Harbor Towers. I'd like to echo what Tom Wooders said. I won't repeat it. And just one other thing that we have not mentioned is how the view of this project from the water, as people approach the city of Boston, also the view from the other buildings in the financial district and any impedance that might have with them.
Anyone else?
Diane here.
Hi there, Diane Rubin. I'm counsel for the Harbor Towers trustees. I would just ask the committee to look a little bit more about the location of the open spaces on this parcel. I'm hearing a couple of people saying that it's very busy by the waterfront and there's no expansion of the open space along the waterfront. The open space is internal. It's in a retail arcade. The notch is mid-block, and I think during the Greenway District Planning Study there was discussion about that's not the appropriate place to have the crossing. We don't want a mid-block crossing. So has anybody looked at expanding the open space on Milk Street and down East India Row and along the waterfront, which is where the people congregate?
Okay, Lauren and Rich and Chris, we have that written down and something to follow up.
Tim Lehman, Harbor Tower resident again. I just want to second concerns that have been expressed about the traffic, and I don't know that this is one of the Chiofaro concerns, but there are days when I've taken close to an hour at the 5 o'clock time to go from South Station to Harbor Towers. And I suspect that if 50 more cars get put into that traffic jam in the next 10 years, the city will come to a complete halt. So somebody, whether it's the Chiofaro Company or BRA or whoever, needs to think about this problem. It's really getting terribly serious.
So Rick Domino and A Better City with the City of Boston and Massport and the state actually are in the midst of doing $1 million study in South Boston and the area on transportation. Because if there's going to be any future development, we need to get it right. So that study is underway. Is there a public meeting? Do we have the date of the next public meeting yet? We don't have that, no. But we'll be sure that those who are on this mailing list also know about that as well. But absolutely.
Donna Major. I am very impressed with what's been presented here, the architecture and so forth. Very much, and thank you. My only concern as a healthcare provider is for the safety of everyone involved. If there are emergencies here, and we're going to be that much more dense, can we, as this gentleman suggested and others, make sure that there are corridors by which people can move in and out, service can move in and out safely, so people aren't dying because they're not getting help faster.
Okay, so we're going to also follow up on the public safety issues, the fire lanes, emergency vehicles, yes, police, and such. So we're going to make a note we need to get that information as well. Other comments, questions? Yes.
Hi, Julie Hatfield Leland. I'm a Harbor Towers resident of just a year and a half. I moved here after 43 years to get a water view. Don, you said no one wants to have the garage stay. I'm sorry, I'm selfish. I want to have the garage stay. We're on the 21st floor, and I'm sure other people feel the same way and haven't said a word. We right now look out at a beautiful view of the water and the top of the garage. I have a feeling that at 600 feet, we will look out at the side of a building.
Yes, Andrew Oviedo from Harbor Towers. One of the presenters mentioned the high spine axes, and there were 3 areas. One was the back bay. And yes, it's true, there are very tall buildings in the back bay, but after all, the back bay is pretty far from the waterfront. There was another axis that was mentioned down around Haymarket Square. Again, the buildings that are proposed there and they're going up are very high buildings, but they are also not on the waterfront. The other axis was Fan Pier. Again, the same situation has evolved. They are not really skyscrapers. They have been scaled down, and I'm just curious as to how a 600 and a 500 foot tower fit into the idea of high spine axes that you presented to us.
Okay, so we need more information, better clarification on the high spine axis, right?
Just a short comment about the density. That if you don't think the density really affects your quality of life, you really need to investigate it. Just go to New York City and see what happens there. Also, I lived in Chelsea for a long time. You go back and visit, I mean, it's almost impossible to get through the streets. Also, there was an article in the New York Times last week where they were talking about the entire south side of Central Park being blocked, the sun blocked, because of all the high-rise construction. So I think, you know, Boston wants to be a world-class city. people should really see what has happened with all of the building in New York. It's great, it's wonderful. New York has many things to offer, but people have really paid a huge price for it.
Okay, we don't have the shadow impact yet, so we need to be sure that they do further analysis together. Okay, anybody else? Okay, so this is where we're at. Written comments between now and the next meeting, if you have any, if you've thought of something as you think, reflect on the presentation, you can either send to Richard McGinnis or Chris Bush at the Boston Redevelopment Authority, so we have the benefit of that. Our next meeting is June 23rd. I want to ask the committee, would you mind if we started, excuse me, sorry, July 23rd. Committee members, would you mind if we started at 2:30 instead of 3? Gives us a little bit more time. Is that a major problem for anyone? Sir? We'll start earlier and we'll end earlier, okay? Is that okay? We're going to start at 2:30. The next agenda will be a continuation of this based on the questions and the comments that have been given, right? Okay, and Richard, is it okay if we can start at 2:30? Yeah, if we can, okay? All right, Rich.
And I'm just sad to say that Jack Hott has to step down as chair for the committee. He's just overwhelmed with his new job and just couldn't commit to the time that this is taking. And we are looking for a new chair and hopefully get someone appointed as soon as possible. Thanks.